This is just a short list of books that I read in 2017 and a short overview of each, along with my opinion and my thoughts on them. This is in no particular order, and this is an audio only video. So if you want to put me on it in the background or go to a different tab, that's fine. The first book is Arcanum Unbound by Sanderson. This is a collection of short stories and novellas that all take place in the Cosmere universe. All the stories involved have a postscript. The postscripts are mostly Sanderson explaining how the story came about. I enjoyed most of the stories in this collection. There are about three to four that aren't really worth your time reading. The Hope for Elantris, Elementor Jack, White Sand. They're all sort of the worst of the book, while everything else is enjoyable. Overall, I enjoyed the book, but I would say you have to be a big Sanderson fan or just a fan of his Cosmere work in general to really appreciate the book. My top three favorite of this novellas in here are Mistborn, A Secret History. This one just follows Tchaikovsky and his adventures in the original Mistborn trilogy. And my second favorite is Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell. This one is most unique out of all the stories in my opinion, and it has a great and interesting world that I would like to see again. But we probably won't. Sanderson says as much, but who knows, we might get something soon. And my third one is hard to pick. It's, I would say, Edge Dancer, because that one at least ties into the Stormlight archives. Even though it does follow my least favorite character Lift, and, well, she's sort of tolerable. You have to get used to her POV to fully enjoy the story. But once you get into it, the story is really nice. Next is Fireborn by Danglish. This is the second in the Sephirim series, and it's alright. It's young adult fantasy. And depending on how you feel about young adult, you're gonna either love this book or hate it. I'm in the middle. The story of the Skyborn twins trying to start a rebellion against evil Central really is too young adult for my taste, but I still read and enjoyed most of the book. Some of the action scenes are great and fun to read, but some can go on for too long and start to become boring. The plot twists that the book throws out, for me at least, were kind of predictable, and I saw them coming from a while. But it was an enjoyable read, and I'm probably going to get the third book in the series. The next book I want to talk about is Maurice Broaddus, and it's called The Buffalo Soldier. This one I liked, but it was way too short for me. Now this might just be me and my sort of love of epic fantasy and love of long books, but I really think this one could have used a bit more length to it. The story, while interesting, is about Desmond Cope as he tries to protect a young boy with unique special powers from dangerous organizations trying to use him for their own nefarious ends. The book's world is steampunk, an alternate universe steampunk set in the United States. It's rather interesting, but again, the book is too short to expand upon the world building, and I'm not really sure how the world came to be. I think I would love to see more from this writer. I know he has a bunch of short stories and different collections out, but I would still like something set in this universe. But I would still recommend this if you like novellas, that is, and fantasy. The next book I want to talk about is Dragon Lords, False Idols by John Hollins. And this book started out great. It started out amazing to me. The characters are pretty much how you would expect them to be after the end of the first book, which I loved. The first part is really the best part of this book in my opinion. The characters seem to be developing, the plot seems to be going in a different, unique direction, but still with some similar elements. But then by part 2, it sort of starts to fall apart, in my opinion. Not to say it's terrible, but it just kind of loses track and goes back to being the first book again, but with a lot more different elements, but still just not really. And then the third part nearly lost me completely with the weird thing it tries to do, but I powered through and finished it, and I saw the twist coming, and I don't know. I'll probably read the third book out of obligation to finish the series, but I kind of really think the first book beats this one in terms of overall story structure and character writing. If you read the first one, you would probably enjoy this one, but just expect the same and you'll probably won't be disappointed. The next book I want to talk about is The Pillars of Earth by Ken Follet. I have mixed feelings about this book. It's a historical fiction set in the medieval era with a group of people trying to build a cathedral. And originally, reading through it, I loved the book. I thought it was going to be one of my all-time favorites. The character writing in this is just amazing. That's something I gotta give to Ken Follet. He can write character voice amazingly well, and I was really hooked to see what would happen next. But then, I would say about maybe halfway through, or maybe 2/3 of the way through, it sort of started to lose me. The villains weren't really as threatening as they seemed in the beginning. They became more Saturday morning cartoon villains they come up with a plan to ruin the protagonist, but then the protagonist save the day, and then the villains come back next week to do the same thing. It kind of becomes tiring after a point. And then there is the romance arc that really just didn't interest me at all, and it kind of felt like it was just adding on just to add on another entire thing that I did not sign up for. As I mentioned, the villains are weak, and William, I think, is the weakest of the villains. He kind of just is the generic evil bad guy who just is pure evil and just really annoying, in my opinion. This is a slight spoiler, but nearly every time we see him in a viewpoint chapter, he's raping a woman. And that's really just annoying at some points. Like, when he first does it, it's like, whoa, this guy is just evil. But then when he constantly keeps doing it, it kind of just loses its impact and just becomes, why is this in here again? We get it, he's evil and doesn't respect people. But like, you don't have to keep putting it in to every viewpoint chapter. But I kind of am in the minority on this one. It seems to be a very popular book. But, I mean, I would say the first two-thirds of the book is great, and then the last third is just really awful. And besides for about three to four characters, I liked everyone. There's just a few characters that just got annoying after a while. The next book I want to talk about is Game of Thrones, books 2 through 5. So, I originally was skeptical about reading Game of Thrones. I mean, I got the first book back in like 2015, and I was just lazy about trying to read them. I got the audiobooks and listened to the first one and wasn't really interested, so I just got the second one out of obligation. And then about when I was reading the third book, I began to get interested in the characters. I don't know how or which character really set me to get interested in them, but I really started to get into the world and the characters and started to really root for them. The book also really surprised me. Being on the internet, I thought the only thing I saw of Game of Thrones was blood, violence, and sex and murder and all that. But the books have a heart to them. There is a small heroicness to some characters, and it's not all doom and gloom and sadness and death. And I want to talk more about that, so I'll probably do a video on them later. But for now, they're good books. You have to be tolerant of the sort of dark violence they have, but if you are, you'll probably enjoy them. And if you aren't, you probably will not enjoy them and probably will hate them. The next book I want to talk about is Spiderlight by Adrian. Okay, I'm gonna mispronounce this. Adrian Tchaikovsky. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to pronounce that. This was the first book I read this year, and again, like with Pillars of the Earth, I have mixed opinions about them. The plot is their standard fantasy affair of an evil overlord has about to conquer the world, and a set of 5 heroes goes to stop him. I can't really get, like, I like some parts of it, but it's really not a story for me. It's both too cliche and not cliche enough, in my opinion. I know that sounds weird, so let me try to explain. The book has standard fantasy tropes, but it tries to do something different with them towards the end. And I saw it coming. Like, when they get to the holy city, it kind of became obvious what was going to happen and what was going to become the plot twist, but it was just sort of painfully obvious towards the end, where the characters just started saying things that were obvious and kind of annoying. And I don't know, maybe if he played it everything straight, I probably would equally dislike it, but I just didn't like the twist he tried to put in there to make everything different. And my favorite character died. I wouldn't recommend this. Maybe you probably like it, but I enjoyed reading it, but I don't think I liked it. The next book I want to talk about is Delicious in Dungeon. This was the only manga I really remember reading last year, and I really loved this book, manga, whatever you want to call it. I originally saw posts about it on Tumblr just with some of the posts about it, and I was interested, so I found a copy and I read it, and I really enjoyed it. It was funny. The characters had a good interaction with each other, and the premise was interesting. The premise is that a group of dungeon explorers lose one of their party members to a dragon and have to go rescue her. But along the way, they get hungry, so they decide to start eating the monsters in the dungeon. It's rather a good concept for a fantasy manga, and from what I've only read the first one, but it's pretty good and doesn't really get old. The characters, again, make the story work, and I would recommend this if you like comedy manga. Next is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This is my favorite book I read last year. As you can probably tell by my selection of books that I've already told you about, I'm a huge fantasy nerd, and Sanderson is one of my favorite writers of the genre, and this book is really great, in my opinion. The 3 mains all have great, amazing art. And if you, like me, have had trouble getting into Shalon's story, I think this book will make you interested in her, because it did for me. The first book, I really liked Shalon's story, but it really wasn't. It was hard to care because he wasn't really in any danger. Well, he was in danger, but he wasn't on the Shattered Plains. And then book 2, she was getting to the Shattered Plains, but she was obnoxious, and it was hard to root for her. But here, her arc is amazing, and it is very, very worrying about how bad she is at coping her past trauma, but her whole arc in this book is very great, and it's really wonderful to see her develop as a character. But I think, thankfully, this time around, Kaladin does not steal the spotlight. His arc is great, but Dalinar is really the star of this book for me. His whole arc about learning to forgive yourself and redemption really just great story beat, and I love it. Ambitions, because this story is a bit different than what I would have originally thought it was going to be, and it has some twists that will probably surprise you. But there are a few things that are kind of annoying to me, personally, at least. Big surprise about the Knights Radiant and why they quit being the Knights Radiant rather was disappointing, in all honesty. It's not as big as the discovery Kaladin makes in his first few chapters, but it wasn't like a major disappointment. I would say Alec's arc really kind of just dropped the ball, but everything else was spectacular. there's also a whole lot of emotion in this book. There is a few times, I think I got a little teary-eyed in 2 different parts of the book early on, and then a third time later in the book when everything goes wrong happens. But yeah, if you like the Stormlight Archive, I think this is the best book so far in the series, and you will really love this book. And if you are a Sanderson fan and you haven't read this, you should read this. It's a great book and an amazing story. Well, that's it for me. Thanks for watching and have a good night, or whatever time you are watching this.